In 1348, London wasn't just a city, it was a ticking clock, a claustrophobic death trap waiting for a spark. If you breathed the wrong air or brushed against the wrong sleeve in a crowded market, you were essentially signing your own death warrant. Most of us today see London as this invincible, sprawling global capital of glass and steel. But there was a dark, suffocating moment in the mid-14th century when the heartbeat of the city almost stopped forever. To truly understand the London we navigate today, the one with the bustling underground and the neon lights of the West End, we have to peel back the layers of history, past the Victorian brickwork and the Georgian townhouses, down into the mud, the stench, and the absolute psychological terror of the Black Death. 700 years ago, the geography of London was a nightmare of its own making. It was a cramped, chaotic maze of timber-framed houses and thatched roofs that seemed to lean over the narrow streets, blocking out the sun. Imagine a city of 70,000 people packed into a space so small you could walk across it in 20 minutes. There was no such thing as a private space. The streets weren't paved with stone. They were a thick, viscous slurry of rainwater, animal blood from open-air slaughterhouses, and human waste tossed directly from upper-story windows. The smell was a physical force, a cocktail of rotting fish from the Thames, tanning chemicals, and the heavy, acrid soot of sea coal fires. It hung in the air like a shroud. This was the world the most efficient killer in human history was about to call home. By late summer, a chilling silence began to drift up from the southern coast. Rumors spoke of a great pestilence devouring Europe, but Londoners were busy. The markets at Cheapside were a riot of noise, merchants screaming their prices, the clatter of iron-rimmed wheels, and the constant, deafening tolling of bells. Life felt permanent. Then the ships arrived. They docked near the Tower of London, carrying fine silks and exotic spices. But hidden in the dark, damp corners of those cargo holds were the real conquerors. They weren't soldiers, they were fleas, nestled in the fur of black rats. When those rats scurried down the mooring ropes and into the rotting wooden piers of the Thames, the fate of half the city was sealed. The true horror of the plague wasn't just the fact of death, it was the process. It began with a localized pain, followed by a fever so intense it felt like your blood was boiling in your veins. Then the buboes, hard, excruciating swellings appearing in the groin, the neck, or the armpits. They would turn a deep purple black and ooze a foul-smelling mixture of blood and pus. If you're finding this imagery hard to shake, you're starting to feel what a Londoner felt in 1348. Every neighbor was a potential executioner. If you value these deep dives into the darker chapters of our past, consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us keep these stories alive, even when the subject matter is the opposite. As the winter of 1348 bled into a terrifying spring, the very fabric of London society disintegrated. We often believe that great tragedies bring people together, but the Black Death was a poison for the soul. It forced a kind of social distancing driven by pure, unadulterated panic. Parents, terrified by the sight of a cough, would abandon their children in the middle of the night. Husbands would leave their dying wives to rot in the streets, only to find the same nightmare waiting there. The rich, the king's court, the wealthy merchants, they bolted for their country estates. They left the poor trapped in their tenements to face the end alone. The church, the singular pillar of the medieval world, began to crack. Priests began to refuse the last rites. They believed the miasma, the foul, invisible air, carried the disease, so they shuttered the cathedrals, leaving the dying to scream for salvation outside locked wooden doors. Think about walking down Fleet Street at the peak of the outbreak. The most haunting thing wouldn't be the noise, but the absolute, crushing silence. The commerce had died. The taverns were empty. The only sound left was the rhythmic tolling of a lone bell and the grim, gravelly cry of the body collectors, "Bring out your dead." When the churchyards overflowed, the city was forced into a macabre kind of innovation. They began digging plague pits, gaping, cavernous trenches on the outskirts. Bodies weren't just thrown in, they were layered with a strange, desperate neatness, stacked like cordwood, a futile attempt to maintain dignity in the face of an apocalypse. What is truly mind-bending is that if you stand in the shadow of a glass skyscraper today, or wait for a train at Farringdon, you are literally standing on top of the ghosts of 1348. During the construction of the Crossrail project, workers stumbled upon these pits. They found skeletons of men, women, and children, perfectly preserved for 7 centuries. It's a jarring bridge between worlds, the high-tech, fiber-optic veins of a modern hub being carved directly through the mass graves of its ancestor. The London we see above ground is built on a foundation of bone and memory. Now, let's talk about the doctors. Medieval medicine was, to put it mildly, a desperate stab in the dark. Men in leather cloaks and bird-like masks, filled with rose petals and vinegar, thought they could ward off the evil air. Their prescriptions? If you were wealthy, you might be told to drink crushed emeralds. Yes, literal gemstones. If you were poor, a plucked chicken rubbed against your sores was the standard treatment. The stars were blamed. God was blamed. People wandered the streets, whipping themselves in public penance, hoping to appease a god they thought had turned his back. But the plague didn't care about your prayers. It killed the saint and the sinner with the same mechanical indifference. By the time the pestilence began to wane, London was a ghost of its former self. But in the ruins, something unexpected happened. The massive loss of life created an unprecedented labor shortage. Suddenly, the surviving peasants realized they were no longer expendable. They were valuable. They began to demand higher wages, better conditions, more freedom to move. This was the first major crack in the wall of the feudal system. The Black Death was a catastrophe, but it acted as a brutal reset button. It forced the survivors to rethink everything, from public health to the value of human life. The resilience of London is its most defining characteristic. This city has been burned, shattered by bombs, and thinned out by pandemics. Yet, it reinvented itself. Every time you cross a bridge over the Thames, remember that beneath the asphalt, there is a layer of history that refuses to stay buried. It is a city of layers, where a medieval street plan still dictates the flow of modern traffic, where the echoes of 1348 still whisper, if you know how to listen. We look back at these people and feel pity, but there is hope in their story. It proves that even when the world feels like it's ending, even when the air is thick with fear, the city learns to breathe again. London didn't just survive the Black Death, it was forged by it. The next time you see the sun setting over the river, think of the 70,000 souls who once called those same muddy banks home. They are part of the brick and mortar. They are still here, in the silence between the sirens and the roar of the crowds. Before we leave the 14th century, I want to hear from you. If you could step into a time machine, knowing you had a modern vaccine in your pocket, which part of medieval London would you want to see with your own eyes? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this journey through the shadows as gripping as I did, make sure to like the video and share it. Your support allows us to keep digging into these stories.
Thanks for walking through the shadows of the past with me today. I'll see you in the next chapter.